Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your break and got a little bit out of your seats or out of your couch and stretched those legs a little bit. For those of you that stayed on, you heard the conversation that's about to happen a little bit, and I think I'm really looking forward to this. Ben and I got introduced to each other in President's Cup regionals back in 2018. So I started officiating in 2017. My first event was the regional event was the President's Cup in, was it Ohio? Somewhere along those lines, Ohio or Indiana, one of those. And we've gotten along really well since then. So when Ben was offered up to join the academy this year, it was really a big honor for us to have him on, and our conversation started about what do we want to talk about. And Ben brought up this coach referee relationship. And I was just down in Kansas City for the U.S. Soccer's Coaches Convention, and we had a conversation about that there as well. And we've been having these side conversations throughout our state as well about how can we improve these relationships. And I think the number one thing is communication. One of the things that we often overlook is we don't speak the same language as the coaches, and the coaches don't often speak the same language that we do. So there's this sort of imbalance of what's going on, and we got to figure out a way to communicate with each other. So I think today's conversation is going to start that track for us and hopefully lead further conversations going forward. Ben, he's the current NYSOA vice president, also a national referee coach and former national referee. Ben, I'll let you go ahead and introduce your panel and go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to say thank you to the Iowa Referee Committee for continuing putting this event on. Terry Vaughn was a very critical mentor and role for me growing up, seeing him at regionals and putting his time away from his family. And it's just awesome that you guys still continue to show support for this event. NYSO will always be a partner in this event. Would like to say thanks to everybody on the Zoom today for taking your time away from your family and participating in this event. We can't do what we do as players, coaches, or referees if we don't have that support from family. So I really appreciate everybody taking their time. Before I kind of introduce the panel, which is, we had one correction in the panel. We have an MVP substitute, Jason Bird, that stepped in for Jeff Ritchie at the last minute. Chris Swift is another great substitute that stepped in for, and both of these are family. I had two coaches that committed and they had family functions. One was Chris filled in for Jacob. Jacob had a surprise birthday party that his wife threw. And when she found out that she committed to this, and he's like, man, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, dude, it's families first. And Ken Newber, I'll give these guys the floor in a minute, but I just want to say, just personally, I got into refereeing late in my career. Some of my successes because of my background as a coach, as a player, is I was able to build relationships with coaches, and it really excelled my referee career faster because of those relationships. And once we establish these relationships, it makes our job easier. It makes the coach's job easier because there's trust. And when there's trust that's being built between that sideline and those officials, it from a coach's perspective, it would make my job easier because I could trust. Not that I agreed with every call, but I could trust that I was in good hands. So, and Assad mentioned that what NYSOA is doing with coaches going forward after the event that we just had in St. Louis, I think is going to really help everyone have a better product, whether it's the officials, the coaches, or the players. So we'll start with Ken. Ken Newber, University St. Francis, Man, we've known each other for years, man. Played against each other, coached against each other. I'll let you just give me a little rap about yourself, man.
Uh, well, I actually recruited you too, Ben, way back in the day. Ken Newber, I'm the head women's soccer coach at the University of St. Francis in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I started my career a little differently than most. I played my 4 years and then was away from the school for 8 months and was hired back as the head men's coach. So I was the head coach of players I played with. And then I started the women's program a year after that. I did both programs for 5 years. Was at St. Francis for 14. Had an opportunity to become an assistant coach at the University of Notre Dame up in South Bend. I was there for 6 years. Great national championship, played in Final Fours, all that great stuff. Stepped away a little bit, and then I'm just finishing up my first year back at St. Francis, back at my alma mater. So it's great to be here.
Awesome. And then the super sub, Jason, thanks for stepping up, man, at the last minute. Jason, PFW women's head coach, got to meet him 8 years ago. And actually, funny story, I don't know if you know this, Steve Siamos called me and he's like, hey, listen, I got this coach is coming into IPFW at the time. And he's like, he's a real good guy. I like him, treat him well. But Jason, let's hear a little bit about yourself, man.
Yeah. As you said, Ben, good to be here. Thanks for the invite. Nothing like being a relief pitcher here. But yeah, at Purdue University, Fort Wayne right now in Indiana. I've been the head coach here for 8 years. Prior to that, a whole host of different institutions that I've worked at that I won't rattle off that 15-year list or whatever it's been, but I've coached at multiple different levels like Ken has. Been at the Division III level, played at the NAIA level. I've been an assistant coach at the Division I level at multiple institutions. Been a head coach for a little while, obviously here. I did spend a little bit of time refereeing when I was in college and just post-college for about 2-3 years, but definitely didn't have the mentality. I wanted to be yelling at me, not like listening to people yelling at me. So ended up getting out of that, but definitely appreciate everything that you guys do as referees and as officials, and the commitment that takes, because I spent a little time doing it, and it's not for everyone, obviously. And so good on you guys that do it. And it's greatly appreciated, probably more so than coaches and players are ever able to actually articulate to you guys.
Yeah, there's very few times that I've gotten the thanks. You know, you're just the juices are flowing, and it's just that everybody's loving to tell you when you did wrong. Chris Swift, man, I'm gonna thank you so much for stepping in. We've never met before, and I just kind of looked at your bio, man. You do a ton of stuff at the university.
Yeah, I do. And I bounced around as well. So I've been the head men's coach here at Greenville University in Southern Illinois. So we're 45 minutes east of St. Louis. So I've been here for 9 years. Before that, I was an assistant coach for 4 years on the women's side at the Division I level down in Texas and in Kentucky. But I played at an NAIA out in California, and that's where I was born and raised. But here at Greenville, I'm assistant athletic director, assistant strength and conditioning coach, head soccer coach. We got a roster of 45, so I'm herding cattle as well with that. And so, yeah, I do a little bit of everything.
That's awesome, man. When I saw that, I'm just like, man, I struggled when I was coaching. I just had to do one hyper class. And I was like, man, you kidding me? I just want to coach. So, you know, I sent you guys some questions last night, and I just, you know, we're just going to, all four of us is going to go through the questions. And from today, I would like just referees to be able to humanize the coach. One of the hardest stories I ever had when I was coaching is we had a student athlete that sat in, and we didn't really know if this student athlete was going to be on our team or not. And when they sat down, we found out that his parents His mom was going through chemo, and it was the hardest thing that I've had to go through as a coach in my coaching experiences. And these are, I mean, it's everyday life situations that you guys are dealing with that translate onto the field. You know, how do you manage them? How do you take that information? It was the most difficult thing that I remember turning and looking at my head coach and saying, man, I wish that I could just coach. But you guys do so much more than coaching. But we see you, like I was saying in the before we got on, we see coaches are there 365 days, 24/7. Your phone is always available for your student athletes. And we only get to see you, if we're lucky, two or three times a season. And we see you, those two or three times are the most stressful times probably in your job. But just going to ping some of these questions off you, Ken. We'll start with you first, and we'll go through as quick as you can. What are your top three stressors as a collegiate coach?
Well, first and foremost is job security. I think that's one of the things that kind of sometimes gets lost is that we run a business, and it's a business of growing individuals, helping them get their degrees and everything. But our jobs, we work 9 months of the year preparing our kids for those 3 months. So I think sometimes in season, that's probably the most stressful part is just making sure the ducks are in a row and everything goes smooth. The second stressor is just making sure you're constantly giving your kids the quality experience they deserve. You're not going to keep, like with 45 on the roster, I'm going to have 34 in the fall. My job is to try to give all 34 the best possible experience, help them navigate the academic side, the social side, the soccer side. So that can get pretty stressful at times. Like you said, being a part of their lives is a 24/7 fun obligation, but it also gets stressful. And then I think another big stress is obviously the success of your program. We all want to be successful. We all want our programs to succeed, our players to succeed. There is external factors to that, right? When at St. Francis, I've got the luxury in a way of a lot of that success is internal drive, and the school wants me to do well, but it's more of a want. At the Division I level, it's you have to do well, and those are very different stresses and stuff. So I think those are the stresses that drive us day to day to continue to excel, but also affects us mentally.
Awesome. Jason, same one, buddy.
Yeah, I feel like most of what Ken said would be in line with how I would feel about things as well. The two things that I would kind of pile on with what Ken kind of talked about was that support for our student athletes and what's going on in their lives off of the field. I think especially recently going through COVID and how that changed their lives and how they go about their daily routines. The mental health issue that we're dealing with. There are some things that have obviously been going on a national level with some student athletes dealing with some mental health issues. And so I think ensuring that we are taking care of all of our student athletes, making sure that they're in a safe environment, whatever that might mean for each individual, which is going to vary from person to person. So ensuring that is taken care of. So that stressor alone, knowing that their families aren't here, their blood families aren't here, and that we are responsible for ensuring their safety, it is pretty stressful. Realistically, I got a call a few weeks ago, and it was 2 a.m, and I was up on the phone until probably 4 or 5 a.m, dealing with an issue that a kid was having. And those are not necessarily fairly routine, but it happens. And so knowing that you have to be there in those situations and you can't turn off. And if you're on vacation, it's great, be on vacation, but you're still there. You have to be there for those 30, 35, whatever you have on your roster. So I think that's a huge stressor just to kind of pile on with what Ken was saying. The other thing that I think is a massive one that doesn't get talked about a lot is most of us, and it varied for me depending on what level I was working at or what role I was, head coach, assistant coach, whatever it might be. But generally speaking, we're working somewhere between a 70 to 90 hour work week. And you have to somehow find a way to balance your family life with your responsibilities professionally. And that stressor, I think, is a massive one that doesn't get talked about enough, even in our circles as coaches. The fact that you are taking a lot of time away from family, and it causes a lot of conflict with a lot of different coaches with their loved ones. And so I think balancing that life, family, sort of professional balance, that's very difficult and a pretty high stressor as well.
Excellent points, man. Excellent points. For me, the refereeing, I tell referees there's a triangle that's refereeing, work, and then family. Then there's this circle in the middle. And as soon as that triangle gets in balance one way or another, the other two are going to be affected. So well said. Chris, any other stressors that, I mean, very good stuff by these two guys, man.
Yeah. So Jason kind of stole my thunder a little bit with the work-life balance and trying to, I have a 5-year-old at home. And so trying to balance all of that with the work week. But I would also add, from a smaller school perspective, that a lot of us are enrollment driven. And so I have to maintain a large roster of 45. So I have to recruit the kids in, and that's a 12-month-a-year stress to make sure that I'm hitting my roster expectations. But then on top of that, you got to re-recruit the kids, provide them a great experience every single day. You're re-recruiting them to come in. And then I get into season, man, I get to game day. I get to when the ball kicks off. That's my least stressful part of the day. Because I'm trying to sort out, I have one grad assistant for my program. And so I'm trying to sort out transportation, food, uniforms, laundry, everything that goes along with that, that, man, we get to kick off, and that's the best part of the day.
That's awesome. Just to kind of piggyback on that is, the one thing I try to help with referees understand is, like, man, when we walk into the game day, like, we let coaches do their thing, try not to interrupt them. Like, this is their time where they have structure with their players, their warm-ups. And if you're running late, and that's an added stress to a coach that a coach never has to, and having that professional mentality of letting people know what your timing is, not interfering with their warm-ups, having a quick conversation when the coach is over by the bench instead of running onto the field and interrupting their warm-up. It just added stress that sometimes translates over to their team during those warm-ups. Chris, I'm going to let you go with this one. Start with this one. What is the most rewarding part of your job? And you kind of tipped it a little bit.
Yeah. So I would think there are two things that just immediately spring to mind just recently. First, one of my players who is actually going to be coming back for a 5th year before becoming a grad assistant just sent me a wedding invitation. And so just being able to be involved in their lives beyond just being on the soccer field, beyond what's going on here for their day-to-day, but being part of the future and that big picture part of their lives. That's just fun, and it makes everything rewarding and worth what we're doing here. And then the other one, we just had our banquet to wrap up last season, and just as we were honoring our seniors and just looking back at their growth over the 4 or 5 years that they've been in the program, and getting up in front of everybody to talk about where they started and then where the journey ends as a collegiate soccer player is it's one of the most rewarding times of the year for me.
Awesome. Jason, anything on that you'd like to add? Most rewarding part of your job?
No, I think Chris hit it pretty much on the head. I agree with everything that he said, and basically same concept. Yeah, just seeing families grow. We have an alumni event every single year, and to be able to bring those kids back that are no longer kids and they're adults. And I think one of the unique things about our position as coaches is these kids come in at 18 years old or so, and you're a father figure, you're a mother figure, you're that role, but you serve a multitude of those types of roles. But as you go through their career, they graduate, they start families, they get married, they get into their careers. As they come back, or as you continue to communicate with those people, they become friends. And there are kids that I coached when I was 23 years old and had just graduated college, and I come across them and we go and hang out when I'm in different cities. And it's just those players become family to you down the road. And I think that is a very exceptional profession, because I don't think you get to do that in very many different types of careers. And in ours, that's probably the most rewarding. I think everyone knows, just like you guys, we don't get paid probably what teachers should get paid, and you guys should get paid. But for us, I don't think it's about the financial reward. It's about those relationships and that you're building on the field with your players, but also with your colleagues in an athletic department, and seeing their kids grow, their players, and seeing how that all goes. I think it's a pretty remarkable profession that way.
Well said, man. It was when I was at IPFW at the time, watching Kelly Hartley go from being a very successful women's volleyball coach to becoming the athletic director, and watching her with her daughter. This little girl that used to run around the gym, then all of a sudden, excellent point, man. Ken, anything you'd like to add on to that?
No, anything else would be cliche in a lot of ways. I mean, we really, I think sometimes you guys see us on game day, and sometimes the impression is it's all about the result. And I think for me, sometimes when I get excited on game day, it's because this is a part of their journey and the experience. And you, as coaches, we want that experience to be as positive as possible. Wins are positive, right? and so I think that's sometimes that this past year we struggled a bit, and so it was mentally draining on me because it was mentally draining on them. And I think sometimes as coaches, we want to fix things for them so their experience is the best possible, and the reward is like you said, the families and the legacy down the road when you run into them. I mean, I'm going to probably have, I'm recruiting the daughter of one of my players right now from years ago. And that's an experience and a half. So.
Yeah, that's unbelievable, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
like on Wednesday nights, I play men's A, and there are kids that I used to coach that were 13 that are grown men that I'm playing against, and they're there with their families. And it just,
Yep.
It really is an awesome experience that like Jason, you're saying, and Chris, that we're part of their lives. We get to see these student athletes grow up and be productive people in society, let me go with Jason. You're up, buddy. What motivated you to become a coach, and why does that help you on the path that you are on today?
The real answer, or the funny answer, I guess, is the fact that I tried to pursue playing professionally, and I was too slow, too small, didn't have the strength, wasn't good enough on the ball, and wanted to stay in the game. I had been coaching a little bit when I was in college, just to sort of do a little side hustle, make some ends meet, but got intrigued with, again, those relationships, passing on the knowledge that I had as a player to younger players, and to try to continue to stay within the game and give back in a way that I could. I think ultimately it was always meant to be. I knew when I was in early high school that I wanted to be a teacher. And so I went to college. I was an education major. And that was always going to be my path, is go on, teach in high school, coach high school soccer, get involved that way. I didn't know that coaching in college could be a profession. It could be a career. But I think that all stemmed from being raised in a military family and having a father who coached us when we were kids, and just having that relationship built into me from a very young age, that it can be a really rewarding experience. And so we were raised by a guy that he kind of coached us as he was raising us. That's how he parented. And it worked really well. And I loved that aspect of my childhood, my youth. And I got fortunate enough when I realized my playing days were done, that my college coach had a friend that was looking for a graduate assistant at Western Kentucky University. And unfortunately, that men's program is no longer in existence, but had a great opportunity working there with David Holmes, and that kind of kicked off my career. But I think just those experiences that you have as a player, and when you're being raised with other coaches, that influence that they have on you. And I can think back to coaches when I was 5th, 6th, 7th grade, and how that has impacted me today. And some of those messages that I still relate to our players. And it's so cliche, but quotes that you say to kids, like control the controllables and all those kinds of things. Like, that's something I heard in middle school, and that still sticks with me today, and that I talk to our kids about constantly.
Yeah, man, that leads me to great segue, man. Chris, here's one for you. What is the best advice you've ever been given?
Ooh. I would say probably from my dad. He was a coach and a very good athlete when he was younger, but he always told me to always do my best, because you never know who's watching. So it didn't matter if it was practice, it didn't matter if I was just going and doing something by myself. Always do your best, because you never know who's watching.
Man, it's funny that you say that. That is one of the biggest things that you tell referees as a referee coach, is you never know who's watching their kid, or it's another referee or an administrator from another school. And nowadays, with everything being video recorded, back in the days when I started refereeing, you could get away with stuff because there was no cameras. Now, I mean, everybody's got a cell phone. Everything is, everybody is watching, and you do what you would do all the time. The hardest that you could go, you give it your best, and then you reflect and evaluate afterwards, and I know that you guys do that as coaches, man. How many hours that you guys spend in the film room breaking down decisions that you made, substitutions that you made. And if we're doing our jobs correctly, we're doing the same thing, breaking down video and going through the decisions that we made, because they're not always correct, and they're not always the right decision for that moment. But like, yeah, doing your best, because you never know who's watching. I mean, we say that all the time. Before I get on to the juiciest questions, Ken, I got another one for you. What's the most challenging aspect as your role as the head coach for your program?
Really, you're the CEO of a big project, right? As a head coach, you're responsible for everything, and I think that sometimes can get a little lost, because it's your business. Like Chris mentioned, game day is awesome when the whistle blows, but everything leading up to it, the field prep, it's transportation, food, lodging, everything that goes into it. Those are huge things that you just have to be very organized, very businesslike. The other role is recruiting. I know Chris touched on it a little bit, but it's the recruiting aspect of it is always a piece in your mind, whether it's on game day, during the. I mean, heck, I was texting with a recruit last night on Friday night watching basketball, just because that's our living is based on our rosters. A lot of us, Division I all the way down to NAI. You got to have quality players, but you have to have quantity also, unfortunately. I think those responsibilities are long, but they're also rewarding because you learn and develop. It's no different than any other business. I think sometimes people get it's always family members that don't know really what you do. They go, oh, you coach and well, what do you do in the off season? It's like, well, there is no off season. It's a 24/7. But the rewarding part about it is you're working toward a goal, and that goal, it's always fun project wise to get to the end.
Awesome. So this is I'm going to ask all of you guys this question, and you don't have to give names if you don't want to, and I don't expect you to. But are there any referees that you enjoy working with? And if so, why? Chris, I'll let you start with this one.
Yeah, there are two referees here locally who really stand out to me. When I get them on a game, I just know that they're going to always do their best. The lines of communication are always open. One of them, Don Huber, he going back a couple years, there was a game, he was the center, and I went back, we lost the game. We had a goal that was chalked off for offside. And so I went back and it was a close call and I knew it was. So I was watching the film, and in the film, the whistle went before the flag. And so I immediately just sent a clip to our assigner. And before there was even a response from the assigner, he had forwarded it on. I had gotten a call from Don just saying, hey, if you watch, he flinches with the flag and you can see that it was going to be a bang bang play with the goalkeeper. I was trying to avoid injury. And so when he flinched, I was already looking at him and I immediately blew the whistle. And just him taking the time to call me, and he goes, I'm not supposed to call you, but I'm going to call you. So I hope I don't get him in trouble. But that really helped build that relationship of trust that I looked at it. I was like, man, I could see it. And I was like, okay, there it is.
Awesome. And I won't tell anybody. You're good. Jason, how about you, bud?
Yeah, I've had a number across a bunch of different areas that I've worked with. Since you're on the call, I'll talk about you a little bit, Ben. So one of the reasons I really actually enjoy having Ben on our games is communication is something everyone always talks about, whether it's with relationships, family members, your significant other, professionally. It obviously is a crux of a lot of positive and a lot of negative things as humans. And one of the things I've always appreciated is Ben has always allowed us to communicate with him as coaches, and not only us to be able to communicate with him, but more so probably from our perspective, you communicating back with us. This is what I saw. If we don't agree with something, we're never all going to agree. But just to have an explanation and be able to take 5 seconds to communicate that and not kill the rhythm of a game, but be able to have that quick dialogue, I think really calms our nerves as coaches. So I think that perspective is always massive. In addition to just showing a lot of patience, I think that probably helps with your coaching background. But just that amount of patience. And when a coach draws a line, whether it's myself or an opponent, we know about it and we figure that out. We find that out, but in an appropriate manner. And so I think I've always appreciated that about you, Ben. Andrew Bigelow here in our area, and I know he does a lot of national stuff. That guy's precision to things is incredible. The way he stays with play, but also the way he allows play to develop organically and allows a rhythm to build organically. And it's a unique thing that I think referees have the ability to allow that to happen, or if it's kind of a chippy game and you have to break it up a little bit because there are a lot of fouls, then maybe it doesn't feel that way. But somehow I've had it on both ends with him, and he's done a great job somehow managing the game and keeping things flowing. The last person that kind of comes to mind, and I don't know that I've ever had Vinny as a center. I don't even know if he does centers at the Division I level anymore. He may. I just don't think we've had him very often for that. But I know that I got into this profession partially because of what we talked about earlier, being raised in a coaching military type family, all that stuff. But more than anything, I do it because I love it. I'm passionate about it. It's fun. It's enjoyable to me. And every day I see Vinny walk up to our field, he has this huge smile on his face. And it's like the first time he's ever been a part of a game. And he makes you feel like your game is the most important thing that's happening in the world that day. And that's something that I've always found very, very rewarding, that he's enjoying himself that much. Or if he's not, that guy needs to get to Hollywood. Amazing actor, because he makes it feel very genuine and very passionate. And that's something I've always respected and loved about him as well.
Yeah, great guy, awesome family, but man, is very humble in what he does, and it translates out like very well said. Ken.
Well, since Jason and I get the same referees, and I don't want your ego to get too big, I think it's going to be a reoccurring theme between the three of us. Vinny's awesome because Vinny will the way he explains a call to you, if you've seen it differently, he'll even say it that way. From my angle, I saw this. Well, that tells you that he respects that I have a different angle and a different view. Ben, one of the games that jumps out to me with you was years and years and years ago. Late in the game, we had a kid go into the box, gets taken down. You don't call it. I'm voicing my displeasure a little bit, which I'm not a loud guy, I don't think. But in the midst of the next 2 minutes, you backpedaled my way, stood next to me and goes, "I think I missed that one," and then went about your business. As a coach, can I yell at that anymore? But I'll bring somebody up that many people on the call may not know, but I think there was a referee named Augie Gonzalez from years and years and years ago who passed away of lung cancer. And one of the things I loved about Augie, I knew him when we were in college a little bit, and then when he became a referee and he started moving his way up before he got ill. But Augie's mentality was, he's part of the game. There are three functions to the game. There's the players, the coaches, and the refs. And his ultimate goal was about the game, right? Because if we don't have referees, we can't play. If we don't have players, we can't play. People could argue you could play without coaches, but for the sake of my job, I'll say you need us. But what Augie would do is he'd have great interactions with the players, not in an authoritative way, but more of a, hey, let's just keep the game going. No different than a player would on the field. He'd have that same conversation with his ARs. He'd have the same conversation with the coaches. And that's one of the things that makes me happy looking back on Augie. And I do believe there's a lot of referees in our area that the better ones are because they model Augie and they were mentored a little. I don't know if you were, I'm sure you were early in your referee career, Ben, is that, and no different than Vinny. And I think Vinny probably was the same way. When Augie walked into a game, he had the biggest smile on his face. And it was a guy that I hung out with in college. I knew him a long time, but when he came to ref my game, we had disagreements. We saw things differently. But the beauty of it is, at the end of the day, the handshake was always genuine. He was always happy to come back to our games. And I think that's what makes me sad that he's still not around. But the memories I have of him, both as a person, obviously, is separate, but as a referee, it's just that open communication to know that we all just have different lenses we see the game through, and it's all different angles. I love when coaches start screaming for offsides on the far side of the field. And that's when the center official will come by and just go, okay, you don't have the best angle. So those would be the ones that stick out to me.
Yeah. Fellas, I mean, we could really do this for like another hour. There's some really good hard questions that I had down here that we didn't even get to, but I mean, I really enjoyed today, and I look forward to having you back and doing this in a different capacity where it is longer and we get down to some of these really hard questions of how we view officials and how we view referees and coaches. Is there any last words that you guys would like to? There was, and we kind of talked about it before this. Like Chris, you bring it up. There is in the question and answer is how do we encourage your players to become officials? We kind of talked about it. Ken, a little bit, and it's something that I would, from my organization, would like to have easier access for coaches to send somebody to a website and then they're in, like that's my fix from it, from my perspective. I don't know if you guys wanted to chime in, but that was one of the questions that were in there. But I really appreciate your guys' help today. Thank you very much for participating, and hope to see you guys soon on the pitch.
Thanks for having
Thank you
us.
guys very much.
Thank you.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, and go hang out with the fam. All right. I think.
Thanks, Ben. That was a great conversation. I think, we definitely need to continue this conversation. As you said, it could go for hours. One thing that kind of stood out to me is that we're very similar in both aspects, right? Both referees and coaches have the same stressors that are going on in their life. And I think that open-ended communication during the games is what's going to help build those relationships going forward, and as well as off the field and that sort of stuff. So great stuff. I'm hoping we can continue this discussion later. I think you have another discussion here, so I'll let you introduce Chris, and let's get this one rolling.
Yeah. So 3 years ago, NYSOA formed a committee, the RIDE committee, referee inclusion, make sure I get it correct. Referees for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equality. Tori Penzo headed this up, and what they have done over the last 2.5 years is incredible. But what leads me to get Chris on today is 2 weeks ago on a Monday, I was involved with there was 1,000 participants throughout the country, and it was the Big Ten and officially human organization that put this event on. And it was baseball, softball, basketball, soccer across the country. And I see it here locally a little bit. We're losing referees at record numbers. And we were lucky enough to have Gene Steratore run this 3 hours. It was 3.5 hours, and I was glued to it. That all of these organizations are struggling with keeping referees, getting referees, and these organizations were even talking about in 2 or 3 years that they were going to have to cancel games because the lack of officials. And it directly, what Chris has done with the RIDE committee and the last 2 years bring, using his background and generating numbers for us to see to where we are at has been incredible. But it also helped me understand, like, we can be part of the solution. Everybody on this call can be part of the solution. And out of all these organizations that were talking a couple weeks ago, no one really had a solution. And I don't think there is a solution that's out there currently. But everybody right now is brainstorming, how do we keep new officials? How do we find new officials? and how do we keep the ones that we have currently? So that what leads me to introduce Chris Fabic, man. Chris, blow our minds away again, man.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm on the RIDE committee with NYSOA. So this presentation is predominantly about NYSOA data, but we want to emphasize, right, that this is a new initiative. It's something that we're still in the process of rolling out. So if this is the first time you've heard about it, that's because this is the first time we're starting to talk about it. So we're trying to roll it out to some of our regional reps and our chapter leaders, and I just thought this was a great opportunity to start to share the information that we have seen sort of internally, and just get the conversation started. So over the past year, we wanted to take a look at our current data and understand where we are, and look for ways to encourage growth of all kinds. And hopefully we can find some synergies across all the referee communities, right? Not just NYSOA, but all of them. So every year, I hear when I'm starting the season, right, I hear somebody say this, and it happened a couple weeks ago. Man, these kids just keep getting, or we keep getting older, but these kids just keep staying the same age. And so that's definitely, felt year after year. But that's not the only thing that changes over time, right? We get a little older, but also the demographics of college athletes has changed over time. And so we're going to actually take a look into that a little bit today and see how has that changed for the student athletes, and likewise, how has NYSOA demographics changed over the years. So on the next slide, we took a look at gender, right? So why should we care about gender? On the left-hand side here, we're seeing the breakdown of men's and women's soccer programs in the NCAA. Women are in green here, men are in blue. So we actually have so many more women's programs. And it varies at different divisions, right? But you're actually 24% more likely to referee a women's NCAA match than you are a men's match. And that percentage gets even higher when you move up to Division I. The RIDE committee compared, what we're seeing on the right-hand side here is a comparison between NCAA soccer players on the bottom. That's their gender breakdown over time. So you can see it's actually slightly more than 50% female over time, pretty consistently over the past 10 or 12 years. And then on the top, we're seeing NYSOA officials and their breakdown between male and female. And you can see we have gotten slightly more, a higher percentage of women over time, but we're right around 7% right now. Which is much, much lower than the 52% that we see in the student athletes. So, the purpose of looking at this data is so that we can understand where we are and where do we want to be, and how can we encourage our membership to follow the same diversity trends that we see in the student athletes that we serve, right? We just talked to a bunch of coaches. And it's clear that building relationships is important, and that's important for referees to coaches. And it's also important if we want to recruit some of these student athletes to become referees. We need them to see referees that look like them, that they feel like they can identify with, so that they get the idea in their head, well, maybe this is for me. On the next slide, this is a comparison of 2020 data to 2021. So we've been provided data. It's the arbiter data from NYSOA. And I want to be sure to mention here that all personally identifiable information was removed prior to us receiving it. So we want to make sure we protect everyone's data privacy. But this is just sort of, the raw comparison of 2020 data to 2021 data. And in this particular image, blue represents a state that has less than 5% of their membership is female, and an orange state represents more than 10% of their membership is female. So you can see we're getting less from 2020 to 2021. We have less blue states and more orange states. So we're already sort of making these progressions, and we want to continue that trend going forward. Another thing we looked at is race and ethnicity. So if we want to go to the next slide here. So these two graphics are showing essentially the exact same information, just in slightly different formats, right? So On the top, what we're seeing is a line chart over time. So we're comparing all the different years. The lighter colors here are NCAA student athletes, and the darker colors are NYSOA officials. The NCAA data is only broken out by Caucasian, Black, and other. So I had to mirror that with the NYSOA data. So that's why we only see 3 categories here. We understand that race and ethnicity is far more complex than that, but we can only do what we have data for. So what we see is we see the lighter lines coming together. They're converging as time goes on. They're getting less white and more diverse. And then we see the NYSOA lines kind of just going flat, pretty much staying consistent, although they're not too far from the NCAA lines altogether. The bottom image there is just again, the lighter bar is NCAA diversity, and the smaller, darker bar is NYSOA. And in that one, we're just looking at the percentage of membership that is non-white. So sort of grouping all of non-white as a category together. And we actually see in 2012, NYSOA we would say was more diverse than NCAA student athletes. And then over time, the NCAA student athletes have become more diverse, and NYSOA officials have become slightly less diverse. You can skip through those notes. We've sort of talked about those. That's fine. Thank you. And then here's the same kind of comparison from 2020 to 2021. Darker here is representative of more diverse states. So the 2 maps are not too different, but you can certainly see, some differences between the years. So we'll just go to the next slide here and look at this. So one of the things that we wanted to provide is a list of resources as well. So we'll go through these. I'm not going to necessarily read all of them to you, but like I mentioned before, we want to be able to work together with all referee communities and see how we can encourage new members, especially among those categories that are less represented, that we just looked at, right? So female and ethnically and racially diverse referees. The next idea is we want to support new referees through mentorship. So it's one thing to recruit a new member, and then it's another thing to keep them for a little while, right? I think we all know, we've all known officials who started and they maybe did 1 season or 1 year, and they were like, yeah, I don't like this getting yelled at business. And without support, that's understandable. You sort of have to get to a certain threshold of reaping the benefits before you have the capacity to sort of deal with all that negativity that we can feel. And that's another initiative that RIDE has undertaken is looking at how do we do this retention piece. And that's sort of a partner with this recruitment and just sort of understanding where our data is. So that's not lost on us, and that's a big thing that we're trying to look at, and that's kind of what Ben was talking about too. Is we don't know that we have the answers, right? But we want to at least be talking about it so that we can share ideas and brainstorm together. The next thing, and I'm going to actually provide this to you in the presentation, right? Is we want to provide this data so that people can look at it. Like, it's one thing for just a few people in the organization to see it and start to understand it, but we need everybody to understand it. I mean, it's your data, right? These are the membership should be able to see what we see. So I actually do have there's a published dashboard that's online, and I believe that's going to be shared. The link to that is going to be shared. Yeah, there's a good picture of it. The link is going to be shared, I think, in the chat or somewhere here on the call. So you can actually go here. There is some interactivity to it. If you see at the top, there's some really subtle grayed out dots and an arrow. I don't know if we can circle that or highlight it. Yeah, right up there. These are the navigation bars, and I know they're really subtle, so it can be a little hard to see that, but I'll point them out here in the slide too. So this is available, and anybody can kind of go look at it. You can flip through it, and there's some things you can select. You can hover over things, and it can be a little interesting. If you're interested in looking at some of this, more. It's one thing to see a presentation. You might need some time to digest it a little bit. So if we can go back to the resources. Thank you. Another idea is to sort of just have NYSOA representatives or recruiters at a lot of these other events that happen with other referee organizations. And then, we also just want to reach out to chapters and regions and states that sort of have those higher diversity levels and see what, if anything, they do to encourage those types of memberships, or just share ideas, right? Again, just having conversations, open lines of communication. We're kind of all in this game together, right? And we want to share what is working and maybe what isn't working. And it doesn't mean that what's working in Texas is going to work in Connecticut, right? But maybe what works in Texas can work in Louisiana. So just having some of those ideas open. Do we have another slide here? Perfect. This is just a snapshot of some of the dashboard stuff. I wasn't sure if we were going to have time to go to the dashboard. So just some looks at, we didn't just look at rate, gender, and race. The dashboard covers a lot of other interesting things, like, for example, the median age for females is much lower than the median age for men in the NYSOA membership. And then we've got one more slide here. And this is just showing you where those navigation buttons are. And there's a little dash. If you click on that little light bulb, it'll give you some little tips for how to use that. And I want to thank Ben for allowing us to present some of this data. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you want to email me stuff. I did build the dashboard and I published it, but we had lots of other support going into getting it up and looking at this data. And thanks to the RIDE committee and thanks to Tori Penso for allowing us to do the work. And then, Ben, I really appreciate you letting us share this and kick off some of that conversation and see what we can do.
Absolutely. When we were first presented this data kind of in its raw form a year ago, and then to where it's at now, it's just really unbelievable. But like Chris said, it's having that data that the masses can see, that we don't know is the solution right now. And we're working at the local level to help put this out there so we can come up. But one of the things that I got from the other night that actually Brian Miller talked about, there was a bunch of organizations and what they're trying to do to help with this shortage of officials going forward. But what we have currently right now is to keep the referees that we do have. And the challenge is, how do we keep those referees engaged? And it's one thing to be a member, to a mentor, to be on the phone when somebody's in trouble, but like, how many times do we go as a mentor and then go to the game and actually watch the game and talk with the crew after the game? And it's time away from your family and people don't want to do that. But like right now, we have the keys to keep what we have and keep them engaged. And there was one other basketball official, and she just was like, as a mentee, it's great that what Brian said is bringing that mentor to a mentee at their level and being able to communicate with them, whether it's through social media or at their level, because it has that mentee open up. But just, Chris, thank you very much for the data. Assad, thank you very much, man.
Oh, thank you guys. This has been fantastic and phenomenal data to look at. I wish we had more time to really sit there and go through it all, but we are a little bit short on time. So maybe on another session, we can do this. I think it'd be very beneficial for everybody. So thank you all for your hard work and time on getting this done. Chris, I know as a scientist, data is not easy to work with. So appreciate all your hard work on getting that sort of stuff done.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Take care. Cheers.
Wonderful. Thank you guys again. I really appreciate all that. We're going to go straight into our next session. Unfortunately, we don't have a little bit of a break on here, but I'm really excited for this. I know we've done a lot of non-technical stuff up to this point, but it's going to be a privilege and honor to bring in Mark Kedalesic to talk about movement and positioning. It's something that is constantly in the works, and always we can do a little bit better each time. Mark, thank you for being here. Appreciate you taking your time out of the busy day. I know the USL Championship opens up today, and they're going to keep you busy. So really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to step away from everything you do and come here, present to the Terry Vaughn Academy.
I appreciate it, Asad. Thank you for the reminder that we're about to embark on 1,052 games in Pro 2 this year that will all be observed and assessed. So thank you for that subtle reminder there. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, if you look at my eyes, I am suffering from a little bit of poison oak. No, I did not get in a bar fight with Ben Trevino, so I just want to make clear that that's not the reason my eyes are swollen here. So I wanted to dispel any myths with that right now. So if you'll bear with me with my eyes here, I do appreciate it. I love the Terry Vaughn event. The fact that we can bring all factions of soccer together, college, high school, and U.S. soccer, I think it's a fabulous thing, and I think that we need to do more of it. Everybody in some point in their career on the way up has probably done a high school game, has done a college game into the professional ranks. So the fact that we're all joining together to learn in the same environment, I think is a wonderful thing, and I think it needs to be modeled throughout the country. It's an honor to also be a part of this event because I've had the pleasure of working with Terry in MLS. And one of the most enjoyable moments I can remember with Terry was when he did the NCAA women's final. We got to hang out the day before in a restaurant in Raleigh and just talk about the game and things like that. So Terry, if you're watching here, it's a privilege and an honor to be a part of this event. And I'm so excited to help the soccer community, not in Iowa, but I see we have people on throughout the country. I see some people from Washington State, from Kansas. So to be able to help everybody, I think it's great. And it's an honor for me to do that. So Asad, as you mentioned, I had the esteemed pleasure of having the first technical session here today. Again, no pressure, but I hope that we could all learn a little something here with what we've been looking at from a technical side at PRO and some of the theories from around some of the teachings we see in CONCACAF and other places. So here's what we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about movement over after turnovers. We've got to be able to read the game like players. I saw in the last session, we had the coaches on here, and we need to be thinking like coaches as well. We need to read the game. We can't just be thinking as referees. We have to have some player tendencies. And one of them is, what do we do after there's a turnover? Well, first thing we have to do is recognize the turnover, but hopefully after this presentation, we know what to do and where to go. I talked about CONCACAF. They have a concept known as the free zone, and we'll get into that. I know Nisela talks a lot about it, but we also talk about it at PRO as well. This is my own little take on positioning and movement. Tennis. And some of you are saying, what is this wacko from North Carolina talking about tennis with positioning and movement? Stay tuned. Again, we talk about having a player mindset. Anticipation is part of modern positioning and movement. Negative movement. This is something that we're trying to maybe eliminate in our games. And it's something that some of us may not even realize we do. And it really puts us in trouble sometimes. So hopefully after today, we'll understand what that is and maybe how to avoid it. Movement in the final third. This is very important because what happens in the final third? These are our penalty decisions. We don't want Ben Trevino missing any more penalty kicks and then having to tell the coach, hey, I missed that one. So hopefully after today, Ben will do this a little bit better when he gets back to Fort Wayne, and all the coaches will thank me for it. And also, again, back to that player mindset. We've got to be able to read pressure. So hopefully you're starting to see a little bit as we start to get into the topics. We got to start thinking a little bit as players and coaches, and hopefully this will help you when you take the pitch in your next game. So let's start out with our first concept here. Defensive third of the field. This is where I want us to get into a little bit of participation here. If everybody would look at the chat, here's what I want you to do. When there is a turnover in the defensive third, so we're going on your screen from left to right. When the ball leaves that purple area, should we stay behind the ball, stay level with the ball, or strive to be ahead? If you could, in the chat, put your answer either behind, level, or ahead, please do so at this time, and we'll take 20 seconds. I see we've got 156 participants. Let's wait till we get 100 responses. Again, do we want to stay behind the ball when there's a turnover in the defensive third? Do we want to stay level with the ball, or do we want to get ahead? So we're up to about 55 responses. Again, I'm striving for 100. So another 5 seconds here. We're up to about 75 responses. So even though I'm seeing a wide range of answers, it seems to be a majority of us are going with the answer of striving to be ahead of the ball. And you are correct. For those of you who maybe put level or stay behind the ball, that might have been some of the theory back in the day. But now with the game being as fast as it is, we've got to strive to get ahead of the ball, because eventually that's where the ball is going to end up, going from left to right. So if we go to our videos here, which shows some example of this in the next slide, take a look at this referee here. And this is something I think is a real easy thing to put into practice. As Doug plays the clip, I want you to notice we have a free kick here that's going to be collected by the goalkeeper. So notice now what the referee does. He notices, okay, the scene is safe. The referee is collecting the ball. And let's focus now on what the referee does in this clip. He's already taking off. And look at where he is now positioned. He's already to the center circle, and he's in a good position to see this aerial challenge. So Doug, if you can go all the way back to the beginning, this is something that you can put into practice. When a goalkeeper collects the ball, if the goalkeeper is not being impeded, which might have happened a little bit here, but for the most part, we still can get upfield here because it's not really a major offense. It's a little bit more trifling. Notice now on this punt here, the referee is already within 15 yards of the aerial challenge. For those of you who said, hey, we need to stay level or stay back, think about now, if we did that, where you would be in terms of proximity to the challenge. Let's go to the next clip, which highlights this. So this is more something that is not as dramatic as a 60-yard burst. But notice here how the referee just simply is getting ahead of play as the team is possessing in the middle. And notice how we have a turnover now, and he's already striving to get ahead of play. This is something, again, that we need to do to put into practice to give us better proximity to challenges. So if we look again, there's the turnover. Notice how the referee is now getting upfield once the team in white gains possession. And now we have another bit of a turnover coming up right here. Notice how the referee hits the brakes and is already transitioning the other way and is putting himself in good position to have good views on these challenges in the midfield. So again, when there's a turnover in the defensive third, we want to strive to get ahead of play. Doug, if we can go to the next slide. If we look now and talk about the middle third of the field, here's what I would like us to do again using the chat. When there is a turnover in the middle third of the field, the referee should either stay behind the ball, stay level with the ball, or strive to be ahead of the ball. Again, if we can have everybody go into the chat and put their answer. So far, we're up to about 35 responses. By the way, Doug, I like your music. I don't want to hear Trevino making fun of the 80s anymore. This is good stuff. I like what you have going here as we get to our 100 responses. Thank you, Doug. So we're up to 75 responses. If we could get about 20 more people to respond, that would be great. Okay, we're going to stop there. So out of the 78 responses, I see an overwhelming response of stay level with the ball. Well, let's take a look and talk about that. If we go to our first clip here that accompanies the middle third of the field, let's take a look at the referee. So if we look here from this NWSL game, you're going to see that the ball is played into the midfield right around the center circle. Now, notice there's the turnover coming up here. I'm sorry, this is the wrong clip. So if we notice the ball gets played wide, and notice how the referee is getting ahead of play and has an easy, optimal view for that throw-in decision. So we want the referees to think about getting ahead of play when the ball is in the middle third. Again, you can see the ball pings around here, but when the referee realizes that possession has been established, notice she takes off and gets forward ahead of the ball. There it is. The ball gets played wide and she's going. I want us to think for a second, for those of you who responded, stay level. Think about if we stay level with the ball. Think about what players do in the middle third of the field, especially in the women's game. There is a lot of what we used to call square passes or passes from one touch line to the other. If you're level with the ball, you're taking that passing option away. So this is, again, why we want to have referees in the middle third, just like we do in the defensive third, get ahead of the ball. Notice if that referee was level with the ball, now we're potentially taking away passing options for the Carolina Courage, the team in blue. So we want to have referees stay ahead of the ball. Then that way they can have optimal ways to stay out of the passing lanes. Let's take another look at a clip that accompanies this. So again, you see the referee has to establish once the team gets possession. If we notice here, this is when the blue team gets possession. Notice how the referee stays level with the ball. Doesn't necessarily have the best view. This is why, again, we want the referees in the middle third of the field to stay ahead of the ball, because this could have easily had an obstructed view for this decision here. And therefore, we could have had to rely on the fourth official, which isn't all that bad, but soccer expects the referee to make the decision. So therefore, the referee's got to work to find that passing angle. And as you can see here, that blue player is obstructing the view of the referee. So again, defensive third and middle third. We want to get ahead of the ball so we can have optimal viewing angles. If we go to our next slide, Doug, the free zone. This is something that CONCACAF has come up with, and the free zone is basically the areas in front of the bench area, but it's also the areas opposite of the bench areas. Studies have shown in a lot of the technical studies done in World Cups and qualifiers that there are a lot more offenses or fouls in that area. And think about it from a player's perspective. Right in front of the bench, why do players want to foul there? Because they're message senders. You have all the people there, you put a hard tackle in, it gets a rise out of the bench. It shows that maybe you're the assassin out there. So as referees, we've got to be there to be proactive and preventative. But also, it's just as important is the opposite side of the benches. Think about why players may have a more tendency to foul there. It's because they think they can get away with it. And sometimes we as referees, we think, okay, it's not in front of the bench, it's on the opposite side. We can kind of let our guard down a little bit. We can't, because the players nowadays are so savvy. We need to be just as sharp in front of the bench, but also opposite of the bench in that area near the halfway line and the touch line. So let's take a look at what we mean about the free zone and how the referees can be proactive and preventative here. So if we notice in this clip, there's a challenge, and notice how the referee works just to get in there. Doesn't come sprinting in, just comes in there to make sure the dust is settled. We're lucky in the professional games to have fourth officials, but a lot of us on this call, we don't have that luxury. We don't have a fourth official who can help give us some presence there. So this is why it's important. You just see the referee have a little bit of a presence there. Doesn't come running in hard, comes in there, makes sure as the dust settled. We don't have people throwing the ball at each other. We don't have players pushing each other while they're on the ground. It's a good habit to get into. Again, we're lucky in this game. We do have a fourth official, but even when you do have a fourth official, they can only do so much. So in the free zone, make sure when you have a foul or a challenge here, you're just going in there to make sure that the dust settles with your presence. Get in there in the free zone. Here's another example. So if we notice, the referee doesn't really work to get in there. Look how far the referee is away, 38 yards. And what happens? We have a pretty hard challenge, and now we have potential misconduct. Now, the referee gets the decision correct, but I want us to think about it. What if that referee was a little bit closer before this challenge was made? Does that player potentially put that challenge in because of the referee's presence? I don't have a crystal ball to tell you yes or no, but if we can be preventative here, which is what we're talking about here with the free zone, if we were maybe 20 yards away instead of 38, maybe that player doesn't put that challenge in, and therefore we don't have a risk of a player getting injured. So the free zone, if we can, let's try and have a little bit more proactivity and presence in this area. Thank you, Doug. All right, here's this crazy North Carolina guy talking about tennis now. This is what I want us to think about. When you took your very first grassroots referee course, back in my day, it was called the grade 8 course. What did they tell you that was optimal position? It was always your AR, the ball, and the referee. Well, the same thing still applies today, but I will hopefully want to make this a little bit more simpler for you. Stay left of the ball. And in the areas of the field, I want you to really focus on this. If we look at that orange area, the area in between the penalty areas, this is where we do our work when we are referees. We should strive to stay left of the ball. If you do that, you're going to have, back to your grassroots and grade 8 basic positioning, you're going to have the referee, the ball, and then your AR. Everything will be in view. Now, look at the area outside of the tennis area. Like I call it the singles area for those of you who are tennis players. This is our doubles alley. And if you can see here, this is the little doubles alley analogy I'm giving you on the soccer field. We can't be left of the ball here. If we are, we're going to be off the field and duplicating the AR. So in this area, you should be right of the ball. So basically from this area to your AR, strive to be left of the ball. But obviously we cannot be left of the ball in this little doubles area here. This is where we have to be right of the ball. We don't want to take that extreme position. So now that we're talking about this and we're using the analogy of tennis, if you're in the singles lane on a tennis court and we're talking about it on the soccer pitch, hopefully now you get what I'm saying here. Stay left of the ball, and this way you'll have your AR in view as well as the ball. So Doug, if we continue, take a look here. This is what we're talking about, staying left of the ball. Excellent example by this official. Again, we got to read the turnovers. So notice the ball is advanced, and notice what the referee does here. He takes a bending run to stay left of the ball and got ahead of play. This is best practice. Doug, if we could rewind that all the way back to the beginning. So we see the team gets dispossessed right there, and now the team in white is going forward. Well, the referee could have easily ran straight at the ball, but if he did that, would he have the best viewing angles? The answer is no. So and he notices again this little negative pass here, and what does he do? He continues his run at pace, staying left of the ball. And look at this pass right here. This one coming up is a challenge right here that the player lays off of because the referee is in such good proximity. But not only that, to be mindful, look at how that referee is out of the way. So this is that singles lane I'm telling you about. If you can stay left of the ball here, you're going to have good viewing angles as well as stay out of the passing lanes. This is best practice by this official right here. Let's take a look at another clip which highlights this. So take a look at this one. Notice here, we've got a turnover, and look at the running pattern that the referee takes. He's right of the ball, and now look at this. We have a challenge. Look at how the referee has to make a big decision in this game, and let's see how the referee did on this one. So again, the ball isn't played forward. Be mindful, the referee is right of the ball. Look at where that challenge happens. This challenge happens outside the penalty area, and unfortunately, the referee gives a penalty, and because he gave a penalty, it was dog-so yellow. If we get this correct, it would be a free kick and a red card. So I hope this gives you the importance on this clip, not only of staying left of the ball, but Doug, if you could go to the beginning as well, notice how the referee is a little bit stagnant getting forward. There needs to be much more of a burst here because now the referee is not at pace with the players, and therefore we unfortunately have an incorrect decision. One thing when I'm coaching referees that I like to tell them, if there is a team in possession of the ball ahead of you, you should be offended. Let me repeat that. If there is a team in possession of the ball in the defensive and middle third and you're behind, you should be offended. That's one thing I challenge officials to do that I work with. Thank you, Doug. If we can move on. Okay, anticipation. Some of the stuff we've kind of covered already, but again, I think it's important to highlight. And this is something that FIFA really is using in their teaching materials, especially with the Futuro stuff. This is one of their terms. So let's look at anticipation here and what we mean. So if we look here, notice how the referee has already gone upfield before that person is in possession of the ball. So if we watch this again, this is a subtle thing, but look at how, again, if we can think like players, the referee realizes this is an errant pass and realizes the white team is going to gain possession. She is already going upfield, getting ahead of the ball before that player even connected, stealing the pass. This is a great example of what we mean by anticipation. Doug, if we could go back to the beginning one last time, I want to highlight something else. Look at how much effort this takes. Some of you are probably thinking, man, I got to be zipping around the field 100 miles an hour. That's not the case. Again, look here. The referee realizes that there's an errant pass and just a little bit of a burst saves this referee from having to sprint. So what I also like to tell referees when I coach them, if you can anticipate, you're only going to have to sprint maybe 10 yards, as opposed to if you wait and stay behind the ball, you're going to have to end up sprinting maybe potentially 50 to 80 yards. And over a 90-minute match, that adds up. So be efficient out there by anticipating. Doug, if we can go to the next clip. So if we look here, another great example. Look at what the referee does here. Are we asking a lot? The answer is no. All you saw the referee do on this clip was just have a short little burst. But here's what I want to point out. Why does the referee do this? Well, the reason being, this is going back to us starting to think like players, starting to think like coaches. How much pressure is on the ball here? There's none. And this referee is smart. He reads the body cues of the player. Notice how the player takes a little bit of a prep touch with the head down. For those of us that are players, anytime we drop the head and take a little touch forward, you know that means they're getting ready to play a long ball. So this referee, being as smart as he is, what does he do? He goes and just takes a little short 5 to 10 yard burst into where he anticipates that ball's played. And now look at the proximity he is in front of that challenge. So anticipation, it doesn't have to be a giant 50-yard sprint. Just like we saw in these two clips, it's just a little 5 to 10-yard burst when you realize there's either a turnover or you realize the player is not under pressure and they're getting ready to play long. These are little simple cues that I hope maybe you can incorporate in your upcoming matches when you're the referee. Okay, Doug, we can continue here. Negative movement. You see a word there, negative. Obviously, negative has a bad connotation, and we try to have our referees not do this in their game. What do we mean by negative movement? What we mean here is this is when you are moving in the opposite direction of the ball. In these clips we're about to show, you can see when you do this, look at the proximity lost from the ball when you are the referee and you move opposite of it. So if we look at this first clip here, take a look. So we see an aerial challenge, and notice how that referee backs up, and look at how much proximity he loses. Now, some of you are saying, hey, what's the big deal? There's an uncontested goalkeeper challenge there. Well, think about if that was a contested challenge. We have a penalty decision, in or out. So if we look here, the referee goes backwards. Now the play goes forward. Look at also how the referee was behind the ball in the middle third of the field. Think about what we talked about earlier. If this referee had a little bit more of a work rate here to get ahead of play, he could have potentially been in a better position and then started to move forward. But instead, he feels like he gets caught and he goes backwards. This is what we mean by negative movement. Let's take another example of this. So this is from an aerial view of a game in Kansas City. Notice what happens here. Notice how the referee takes a negative position, and as the ball gets played forward, look at now how the referee has to accelerate and look at the distance lost. He's now 40 yards away, all because of just 3 backpedaling steps. Look at now what we have to do to regain proximity. So Doug, if we can go back to the beginning, thank you. If the referee here would have noticed there's no pressure and could have just read play a little bit better to get ahead of play, instead of being 40 yards away from the ball, maybe he could have condensed it to 25 yards, wouldn't have to have sprinted as much, and therefore we're more efficient, which obviously later in the game makes us more explosive. So doing just a little bit of this negative movement can really be detrimental to your proximity. Again, think about these concepts. Stay ahead of the ball in the defensive third when there's a turnover. Stay ahead of the ball in the middle third. Doug, if we could continue. So now we get to the attacking third. We've harped on all these concepts, the middle third, the defensive third, but what about the attacking third now? So now we're going to go back to the chat. I appreciate everybody's participation thus far. And here's what we're going to do in this one. In the attacking third, do we want to be behind the ball, level with the ball, or ahead of the ball? Please choose one of those bolded words in the answer in the chat box, please. Up to 65 responses. If we could get up to at least 75 to 100, that'd be great. We're about 5 more responses away if we can get to our goal here. Okay. On this one, we had an overwhelming response of staying behind the ball, and you are correct. We want to stay behind the ball in the attacking third. You may be saying to yourself, why? Well, think about the other options. What if we were level with the ball? What do players do in the attacking third? They attack. And how do they do that? Usually with quick combination passes, 1-2s. If you're level with the ball, chances are you're taking that away. Think about if you're ahead of the ball. Now, do you have optimal views? And this is where we make our money as referee, in the penalty area. So one other thing that we'd like to harp on is a term called body orientation. When you are in the attacking third, we not only want you to stay behind the ball, but also we want to have your shoulders square to the goal line. We want to have you with this kind of view with your peripheral open instead of this kind of view where potentially we can miss an off the ball incident. Think about the modern game. We get a ball out wide. What do the attackers running in the penalty area do? They try and make a near post run. What do the defenders do? They'll either try to bump them or grab their shirt. If we're looking like this, we could potentially see that. If we're looking side on, by the time we turn around, we're not going to be able to catch that. So believe it or not, the movement in the attacking third mirrors a lot of what assistant referees do. There's a lot of sidestepping, and that helps us to keep that optimal body orientation of shoulders square to the goal line. Let's take a look at what we mean by that. So notice the referee here opens up, shoulders square to the goal line, a lot of lateral movement there, and now they stay out of the penalty area. That's another thing that we talk about. When do we go into the penalty area? We want to stay behind the ball. Notice how the referee backpedals, and now there is the turnover, and notice the explosion upfield. So let's put this all together because this is a wonderful bit of practice here in the attacking third. So we have a simple throw-in. The referee establishes once possession is made by the team in the dark jerseys, and she opens up, shoulders square to the goal line. Now she's scanning. She notices, okay, I need to move here to get an angle on that challenge, which she does. You see some penetration there by the attacker. She moves forward just a little bit, but doesn't really penetrate the penalty area because, again, this is an area where we can get in the way. We then see total focus, good body orientation, shoulders square to the goal line. Then we have the turnover coming up here in a second. We see some backpedaling first. This is not negative movement. It's okay to backpedal in the defensive third to stay, the attacking third to stay out of the way. And then we see the explosion on the turnover. Excellent bit of attacking third movement. And I just want to harp on, we talked about negative movement. This is more of a thing we want to avoid in the defensive and middle third, because as you saw, when that happens, you lose proximity to the play. But in the attacking third, it has to be something you do. So if we take a look here, notice how the ball is deep to start in the attacking third once we get the video up. So we see the referee has to backpedal to stay out of the way. That's okay. But now we see that little bit of sidestep movement. And here's another thing I like what this referee does. Notice how the referee runs away from the AR. Has to, because we need to, again, protect that penalty area. When we watch this back again, notice how the referee, when the ball goes away from the AR, she realizes that ball is too much for me to sidestep all the way across. So what does she do? She runs, which is fine, with her shoulder away from the goal line to her AR. But once she gets there, notice how she opens up, and therefore we're back in good body orientation. So again, in the attacking third, we want to stay behind the ball, but also we want to have that good body orientation of shoulders square to the goal line. That way we can see potential off the ball incidents. Excellent. So again, let's put our playing and coaching hats on. recognizing pressure. We can't just be referees out on the field. We can't just know all the laws. We've got to, again, think like players and coaches. And I like the initiative I'm hearing with Ben to get more referees from the playing field, because it's only going to help them. And for those of you who are refereeing, I would recommend, if you can knock a ball around every now and then, maybe not like Ben in his over 50 league where Ben flat out admits he fouls everyone. But if you could get out there and kind of understand some of the nuances of the game, like we talked about, when a player puts their head down and takes that prep touch, it's only going to help you when you get out there in the field with the whistle. So recognizing pressure, what do we mean by that? Let's take a look at this first clip here. Again, we're only a minute into the game, and look what the referee does here. He realizes that that team in blue is putting all that pressure on the team in black, and look at what the referee does. A minute into the game. Very smart officiating here by this referee. So again, we see that there's a pretty erratic touch there. He notices that the blue team is putting him under pressure. Notice how, this is another cue here for you players and coaches out there. Notice how the team in blue double teams the player in black. When that double team occurs, look at what the referee does. He's already in motion, and look at now. A minute into the game, he's in good optimal viewing angles, shoulder square to the goal line, and we have a clean goal. Think about if that referee did not have the focus or was not engaged. We could have potentially had a foul, phantom foul there. That easily could have been something that the referee made up. Hey, we're just going to keep it simple coming out. It's early in the game. But no, this referee, being the smart referee that he is, he notices that that team is under heavy pressure. They're double team, and he closes down to get close for a penalty area decision, which leads to a goal. This is what we're talking about, recognizing pressure. Doug, the next one, please. So this is nice because we get to see the panoramic view here. Notice how there is no pressure on the ball. The team in blue is just knocking the ball around. You see they play negative. There's no pressure on the ball. And what does the referee do? He's just picking his moment of where he needs to go by scanning up off the field. Again, we're not asking you to have a gazillion mile an hour work rate. We want you to be efficient out there. When you need to be explosive, be explosive. But look at right here. There's no pressure on the ball. There's no need to go and reinvent the wheel. When there's no pressure on the ball, you just scan and you look to see where the possible passing options are, and then you assess where to go. If we go back to our earlier principles here, notice we're in the middle third of the field. We're ahead of the ball. We're not level with the ball, taking away a potential square pass. We're not behind the ball. So therefore, when the blue team finally does play it forward, we have an additional 15 yards to run. We're ahead of the ball. We're reading play because they are not under pressure. This is what we're talking about. Okay. It looks like we have about 20 minutes left in our session. At this time, are there any questions before all of us take an elementary ref coach course? I don't see any Q&A, but if you have one now, please drop one in there. Okay, with the silence then, that means we're ready to move on. I really need everybody's participation here. All of you are going to be the coach. We're no longer assessors, we're ref coaches. I have for you a couple of clips that I want you to critique the referee on. And to be very honest, there is room for improvement in each one. Can we, in the chat, once we see the clip, use some of the concepts that we talked about today to maybe improve the performance of the official in the clip? So let's go to our first clip and see what we have here. Okay, what I want to highlight in this clip, if you could comment Notice how the referee has to jump. What could possibly the referee do a little bit better on this play using the concepts we talked about today to avoid having this little jump here? If you could drop your little phrase or a small sentence into the chat, I would greatly appreciate it. Doug, let's cue the music. We're up to about 50 responses. If we can get a few more. Okay, we're about 5 more responses away if we could. All right. Listen, we always like to, in these kind of exercises, highlight the negative, but I do want to highlight some positive here as well. If we look at the beginning of the clip here, Doug, if you could go back just a little bit, the referee does a nice job here of recognizing the turnover. You see this pass by Blue, and the referee notices, all right, here we go, crappy touch. White's going to get on the end of it. And what does she do? She does try to get ahead of play. But one thing that we could have done a little bit better, notice the patrol pattern that she takes. It's more direct. What I would have liked to see this referee do, and a lot of you hit this in the chat, excellent observation. Can we stay left of the ball? Maybe instead of going a little bit more straight on, we take a more angular approach to open up that passing lane. And then that way we avoid potentially getting hit with the ball, which we would all know that would have to be a drop ball because it would stop a promising attack. So some good in this by the referee. Recognition of the turnover. Excellent job there. Let's just take the next step. Don't necessarily get ahead of play straight on. If potentially you have to, take a little bit more of a wider bent run approach to stay left of the ball and out of the passing lane. So out of the 62 responses there, we saw a lot of answers with the word left there. Excellent job. I think we're starting to get the concept. Well done, everyone. Doug, if we can go to our next one. So again, stay left of the ball. Think about the basic referee position, principles, pardon me, referee, ball assistant, referee. Again, we're in the singles area of the tennis court. Get left of the ball. Excellent job. A lot of the responses we saw there. Okay, here's our next one. Again, you're going to be the ref coach. Let's watch the referee here. Okay. Again, there's room for improvement here. What could this referee do potentially better thinking about the concepts we've talked about today? Let's get, again, if we can, 75 responses. Here we go. We're up to 33 responses. Can we double that and keep it going? Up to 50. Can we get a few more? All right. So we see a little bit of a variety in answers here, which is okay, but I still see some commonalities as well. So this is good. So again, we're focusing here on the middle third. My apologies. I don't know why that popped up. This is a common mistake we see with referees. So if we watch here, the ball gets played across and then gets played again across the goal. So the referee right now is doing a great job. He's in good position, has a good viewing angle, but it's this next ball where we can do a little bit better. So the ball gets played away from the AR. We talked about that earlier. Look at what happens when the ball gets played away from the AR. The referee does do a good job of getting across. He can't sidestep here. It's too much. But notice what happens. He does run, but he never opens back up to get that optimal body orientation. Notice how he's side on. Those two players standing on the penalty spot right now could be jostling, and he would have no way to detect that. So this is why we're saying in the defensive third, can you open up shoulder square to the goal line? The other thing that happens here is we get this little play right here. Notice how he's ahead of the ball in the final third. He's taking away potential passing lanes. This would have been a good place for this referee to backpedal, to keep those shoulders square to the goal line, to keep play in front of him, which is what we talked about in the final third. So again, stay behind the ball. He did that early on, but towards the end, we did not. Notice how at the end of the clip, the referee did not backpedal nor change his body orientation. This picture sums it up right there. And notice how many players are to the referee's back. We could have had a lot of potential confrontations there that could have gone undetected. But if we open up, we potentially can catch them. Again, we've got peripheral. We can keep that ball to our left and look at those potential off-ball confrontations to our right. So one common thing I want you to take away from that, when the ball gets played away from the AR, make sure you get across that penalty area, but don't forget to open back up. All right, here's our next coaching clip. Let's take a look. Let's watch again. Okay, let's go ahead and get our answers here. Last time we only had 55. The first time we had 71. Let's try and get to at least 60. Here we go. All right, we hit 60. So again, I see a lot of common themes here. I see some terms, negative movement, anticipation. So a lot of common things that we talked about here that you guys are putting into practice in your responses. I'm glad to see this. Doug, if we could start from the beginning here. So if we watch, notice how we have a turnover. So here we go. It's not a turnover. We see that player with his back to goal. He now peels away, and you can tell by his body language he's going to get ready to pass the ball. Well, notice how the referee was a little bit stagnant in the middle third of the field. Using our concepts, if this referee would have been ahead of play, he would not have had to rely on negative movement here. So, okay, we have some negative movement. The referee catches up to play. This is where we have a turnover come up here. So if we watch, you can see there's a challenge put in here. And we have another turnover, this one being in the defensive third. The referee is initially ahead of play, not a problem. But notice what happens now. Remember I talked about if a player is in possession ahead of you in the defensive or middle third, you should be offended. This referee was not offended. He was just kind of saying, okay, here we go. And notice what happens. We're flat-footed, and we've got to now rely on sprinting to catch up when this play goes forward. So this clip here, I hope encapsulates what we talked about today in terms of getting ahead of play in the defensive and middle third, as well as eliminating negative movement. So again, 2 turnovers in the clip, and each turnover, the referee goes backwards as the ball is playing forward. This is that negative movement we have talked about. Notice how the ball's in the defensive third, and now the referee must rely on sprinting to maintain proximity. Hopefully, in looking at the responses here, most of you grasp those concepts. So well done to our participants. Thank you for that. Okay, Doug, if we could continue. We're into the close of our presentation now, and I threw a lot at you in the last 50 minutes here. My advice to you is this: take 1 or 2 of these things and try them in your game. You're not going to be able to put all of this together into practice at once. I'll share a quick story with you. I had the pleasure of watching Assad work the U18 boys final this year at the Youth National Championships. And one of the things I noticed with him is he would backpedal in a straight line. Well, we did a little bit of coaching in game, and we got that corrected. And sure enough, Assad now backpedals to the left. So then the drop zone finds himself with the AR in front of him. What he was doing is going in a straight line, and the ball was getting played to his left, and now he was finding his back to the AR. But just a simple little movement pattern, staying left of the ball into that tennis channel that we talked about, the singles lane, that helped him to help his positioning. And I hope he's used that in games since then. So movement after turnovers. Hopefully now you see the importance of that. Get ahead of play in the defensive middle third, stay behind the ball in the final third. The free zone we talked about in front of the benches, not only there, but opposite the benches. Don't let your guard down. Don't let your concentration down. That's where we see a lot of spa stopping a promising attack because players feel they can get away with it. So have a little bit of mentality to be there. We talked about playing tennis. If we're in that singles lane, the area in between the penalty areas, keep left. Anticipation. We're not asking a lot. If you notice a player's getting ready to play the ball long and they're not under pressure, hey, go ahead and get ahead of play. Negative movement. Let's eliminate that, especially in the defensive and middle third. It's okay in the final third. In fact, we need it because, again, we need to keep play in front of us in the final third. And then lastly, reading pressure. You saw that referee a minute into the game. He noticed a double team. He closed down, and he was able to be in a good position and have a good, clean goal there. Ladies and gentlemen on the call, it's been an absolute honor to present today. I hope that all of you took something away from this. I know that teaching virtually is not as good as being in person, but hopefully we made this as interactive as possible. And hopefully in your future matches, you'll have better positioning and movement with some of the most up-to-date theory from around the world. Assad, back to you.
Thank you, Mark. That was a great presentation. I know, thank you for sharing that story about the backpedaling. I know we also talked about tennis that day too, and I had no idea what you're talking about, but hopefully everybody takes that away. I do know much better now from your coaching lessons. So I really appreciate everything you've done for us. Thank you so much. We'll take any Q&A sessions right now. I know we're going into our lunch break now, but again, thanks, Mark, for taking the time out of your day. I know it's a busy day for you. So enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully the eye swelling gets a little bit better.
Thank you. My apologies for looking like this. My wife's about to kill me, so. Everybody enjoy the rest of the session here. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Looks like no questions at the moment. Mark, I do know there was one question asked. Would this be available? I know you shared it with me, but people were wondering if it would be available to share out with them. So
Assad, you are more than welcome to share that out. So if they go through you, is that okay?
Yeah, that's totally fine. I'll shoot an email out to everybody that attended. So thank you so much for that. In the meantime, everybody, we're at our break period now. So go ahead and grab some lunch. I know I'm starving.